Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is another installment in the Lloyd and Lloyd Parent Workshop series. This is titled Protecting Our Perception. As in direct response to, or I should say, the idea was driven by what's been going on in the news, particularly the George Floyd event in Minneapolis. And being that we interact with children regularly, the subsequent trauma that is no doubt being experienced by them more or less by some or many is a serious thing, and we want to help to mitigate that. All right. My name is Sean Lloyd, and I want to also thank my wife Tonya Lloyd for helping to contribute to this. As a fair use disclaimer, we're going to be using a lot of imagery and artifacts to drive the point home that we're trying to make. Right? A few objectives. We intend to assist in trying to heal the collective psyche because, we've been here before, unfortunately. We'll give a brief timeline of who we were, who we became, and who we are now. And this is very important. We took this approach because it is the imagery itself that people saw on the television and social media that causes the injury to the psyche. And we know how powerful imagery is. So we're going to offer a bit of our own, right, to help counter those effects and to steel, S-T-E-E-L, steel the mind for those types of tragedies. We'll also discuss this as a parenting opportunity for Black genius now, before, and in the future. And we'll review 3 coping strategies as well. Healing the collective psyche. The definition of collective psyche. Psyche comes from the Greek version of the word psyche itself, which means the soul, mind, spirit, or invisible animating entity which occupies the physical body, right? That which you cannot see. That voice that you hear in your head, that thing that animates you, right? We know what this is. We're going to offer some context, so let's have a brief discussion of what that is. Context is the circumstances that form the setting for an event, statement, or idea, and in terms of which it can be fully understood and assessed. Now, these types of things, or nothing actually really happens out of the blue. That has context, and particularly historical context. Right? Sometimes people hate you because of not because of who you are, but because of how they. Well, it's not sometimes, but it's always because of how they feel about themselves, more or less. And we have to do our part to make sure that our children have the self-respect and self-esteem. All right, let's begin with our timeline, pardon me, of ancient civilization. We're going to go from Africa to the so-called Middle East, Fertile Crescent, Asia, Europe, and then we'll bring it to the Americas. Here are a bunch of artifacts, statues from ancient Kemet, Tamaray, Tasseti. You have Amenemhet II, Djoser Senusret. This is King Tut on the bottom right. This is his mummy, and this is the sarcophagus that he emerged from. This is Amenhotep. And this carving on the bottom left, it was created by the 18th dynasty, and it illustrates the Libyan, the Canaanite, Assyrian, and the Nubian. And the reason why we're sharing these images is because you can see by the phenotype exactly who these people were. And by the way, Sheikh Anta Diop, a Senegalese scientist and linguist, he wrote Cultural Unity of Africa, Civilization and Barbarism. He did a melanin test that proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that these were, in fact, indigenous African people, despite what Hollywood may say. Now, this here is from the tomb of Seti I, the ancestor to Ramses. And Ramses, who was said to have had over 700 children and one of the most prolific builders in the 18th dynasty as well. This is a relief of Persian soldiers. If you look at them, you can see the complexion, the phenotype, the hair. This can be seen in the Louvre in Paris. Also, we have the emperor of that Persian Empire, Darius. And this is in the bottom left corner is a winged sphinx. You can watch the face, and it's pretty obvious, and that's what it's supposed to be. These are paintings from the 17 and 1800s of a typical Arab, contrary to the Laurence Olivier and or the Arabs that we see today, right? Time always moves on, and people change as well. Customs change, right? But we still have these things, the greatness that these people produced in fostering and fomenting civilization, and that's the reason why we're showing you these, right? So that because what humans have done, humans will do. All right, these are from Southeast Asia, Angkor Wat, Khmer civilization in Cambodia, Champa peoples in Vietnam, and that bust on the top right with the nose defaced or chiseled away. This is a common phenomenon with these types of artifacts all over the world: North, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, India. The nose, quite often, along with the lips, are often defaced to take away from the obvious phenotype or the appearance of these people. These are artifacts from the Etruscan civilization, which were the progenitors of the ancient Roman Empire, right, or ancient Rome. Again, these are not typical of what we will see not only in Hollywood but in a textbook, right? Unfortunately, it's a criminal mismanagement of in terms of the traditional impression of what's being given to our children, right, across the board. All right, of course, we have pockets where we're fortunate enough to share these things, but a lot of times we don't know what we don't know. These are from Mesoamerica, Mexico. These are from the Shi or the Tamawankan people. Some people call them the Olmec, quote unquote, rubber people. They actually came up with ball games, and if you ask me, I don't think that's coincidental that these sports that are being played now with the rubber balls and objects, these people, their ancestors, not their ancestors, their descendants, dominate these today. These stone heads from solid basalt rock range in weight from 7 to 40 tons, found at sites like Tres Zapotes and La Venta in Mexico. If you like some of the resources, you want to learn more about this, you can read They Came Before Columbus, Ivan Van Sertima. Look up Alexander von Wuthenau, and you'll get a lot more information. You can see who these people are. It's pretty obvious. These are the Mayans, right? These are different paintings of Mayan civilization. And again, they're chosen for a reason. So that, our children need to understand that their existence did not begin, or their foray onto the world stage did not begin in enslavement. And when they see these types of repeated, these ritualistic types of murders, it damages the psyche, and it unfortunately sometimes it convinces some that this is normal and this is their destiny, but we know better. Now we're going to go into the medieval time period, and we're going to focus on the Holy Roman Empire, given its influence on current Western civilization, right? But we're all over the world, right? But we're going to focus on the Holy Roman Empire for the reasons I just mentioned. We have King Ladislav IV of Hungary. This is from the Chronicon Pictum. It's an illustrated book that these were popular with those, of course, that could afford them. People would sell hundreds of acres of land just to purchase one. And if you do some research into books of hours, you'll find that these early history books, relatively early, they contain these pictures and these historical treaties of these countries. On the right, you have Charles I holding this orb here, this golden orb with the cross, this orb symbolizing the world and the planet and Christianity, their duty to spread Christianity across the world. All right, this is Charles V on the left, King of France. Then you have Saint Stephen, King Stephen of Hungary and Poland on the right. He was canonized and he's holding the same orb, as you can see. He was the last Grand Prince of Hungary and the first king as well. And he had battled his own family to take the throne. In defeating his uncle, he had finally accomplished this. So, unfortunately, and it's natural, family fights are not new. And this is one of the ways that we have gotten to the position that we're in now, where sometimes our lack of context prevents us from also being able to define how we're going to interact with each other, right? And these artifacts should give us an impression of how powerful we are when we do that. All right. This is Louis I, or Louis the Great, also King of Hungary. Now look at this. This has been defaced. The color on the face has been rubbed out at a certain level. Now, of course, hopefully you should question, why is this rubbed out, but the clothing is not. All the knights and the bishops are also people of color. All right. These two photos on the left were taken from the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. These are Jesus and his disciples. You can see their phenotype as well. And please do not be mistaken that these persons this is an effect of time, because if you look at the gold trim, it's still bright. This is the color that they were meant to be. This tapestry is called by some Moors and Wild Men. Now, this is from Strasbourg in Germany. If you look at the castle itself, the people inside the castle are Moors. It's the king and the queen, knights, and those that are attacking the castle are what people would consider typically German today, right? Now, these type of images, this is very atypical of what you find just picking up a regular magazine or a book. You really have to research these, right? And this is definitely one of my favorites. This is from a painting in a museum in Lima, Peru. And it shows the transition of not only just the rulership in this hemisphere, but how the initiation of European colonization, who actually helped to foster that movement. Now, if you look at all of these Incan emperors that go down in time, right? And then this is a close-up of the middle section. All these Incan emperors have a similar dress: the gold crown, the scepter, the breastplate, the cape, the earrings, and then you get to the end, and this guy here, this one, he has a more European style, right? His gold chain, his crown are different, his crucifix. All right, Carlos V. This is Charles V, King of Spain, as well as Holy Roman Emperor. All right. Now, he became the emperor of the Incan Empire because he was one of the main persons in Europe that decided that he wanted to colonize the Americas. Right. Now, look at him. Now, what we are taught generally in that Western society was initiated and cultivated by white people, right? But this is obvious. This is obvious that the people that came here look just like us, right? And what happens after that is that you get these Incan noblemen. Now they're dressing as Spaniards. They still have the traditional Incan gold trinkets, but they're dressing now as Spaniards. They've been colonized. And this is what happens when you're colonized. You take on, you assimilate into the customs of the colonizer. All right. We're going to bring this, try to bring this quickly up to a contemporary perspective as well of what's going on in this, the country. Now, one of the, again, I would like to reiterate that the importance of our students having this sort of historical context, because they do not live in a vacuum, right? But if they do, and they do not have that, their perception protected by that sense of self-worth and their ancestral legacy, then that vacuum may be tainted quite easily by the type of imagery that we all saw on the news, right? Now we're going to define a couple terms because the articles that are coming up have these terms in them, but they're very old, a couple hundred years old, and it's very important to sometimes define these terms within the context of the time that they're being used. Now, I minored in African studies, and when we used to look at some of the old texts, we would see words like swarthy and tawny, and people would try to explain them away as meaning a person that looks like Marlon Brando or George Clooney. But as you can see from Webster's Dictionary of 1828, this is online, you can look it up. Swarthy, being of a dark hue or dusky complexion, tawny, and warm climates, the complexion of men is universally swarthy or black. The Moors, Spaniards, and Italians are more swarthy than the French, Germans, and English. Black as the swarthy African. Tawny, of a yellowish dark color, like things tanned or persons who are sunburnt, as a tawny Moor or Spaniard. The tawny sons of Numidia, the tawny lion. All right. Now, we did that because we're going to get into, this is a treatise from Benjamin Franklin in 1751. All right. He was writing this in protest of German immigration at that time. All right. And he says here, why should the Palatine Boers be suffered to swarm into our settlements and by herding together establish their language and manners to the exclusion of ours? Why should Pennsylvania, founded by the English, become a colony of aliens who will shortly be so numerous as to Germanize us instead of our Anglifying them, and will never adopt our language or customs any more than they can acquire our complexion? The last word is extremely important, right? The Palatine Boers hail from Germany, right? And complexion, we know what complexion means. We live in a colorable society, right? He continues, which leads me to add one remark, that the number of purely white people in the world is proportionally very small. All Africa is black or tawny, Asia chiefly tawny. America, exclusive of the newcomers, wholly so. America, wholly so. Yes, we do have roots in this part of the world as well. Ask your grandmother, this is nothing new. And in Europe, the Spaniards, Italians, French, Russians, and Swedes are generally of what we call swarthy complexion, as are the Germans also. The Saxons only excepted, who, with the English, make the principal body of white people on the face of the earth. I could wish their numbers were increased, and while we are, as I may call it, scouring our planet by clearing America of woods, people as well, and so making this side of our globe reflect a brighter light to the eyes of inhabitants of Mars and Venus, why should we, in the sight of superior beings, darken its people? Germans are going to darken the people of America? Wow. Why increase the sons of Africa by planting them in America, where we have so fair an opportunity by excluding all blacks and tawnies of increasing the lovely white and red? But perhaps I am partial to the complexion of my country, for such kind of partiality is natural to mankind. Now, again, when we showed those previous artifacts, it's a lot easier for some people to accept that we were at the level of guiding and implementing civilization a long, long time ago, right? But we brought that all the way up to the Holy Roman Empire, 14, 15, 1600s, right? And now even into the history of this country, where the Germans are still considered to be in a great part to be black people, right? We're also going to address the slavery narrative because also what I found in interactive teaching students for about 17 years is that many of them do feel and assume that their existence and their history begins with enslavement in the United States, and that they were just brought here on a boat to be worked to death in the field, right? Now, that is perpetuated in all types of different movies. It's not just George Floyd that creates trauma, but things like 12 Years a Slave, etc. Those things can be traumatic as well, right? Now, it wouldn't be as bad if we had more of a balance in some of the perception. Now, we're going to try to offer some of that right now. The enslavement of whites extended throughout the American colonies, and white slave labor was a crucial factor in the economic development of the colonies. Gradually, it developed into a fixed system every bit as rigid and codified as Negro slavery was to become. In fact, Negro slavery was efficiently established in colonial America because black slaves were governed, organized, and controlled by the structures and organization that were first used to enslave and control whites. Black slaves were latecomers fitted into a system already developed. Now, if you're lucky, you might get a textbook that would describe some of that as indentured servitude, but that's just slavery by another name, right? And when we get into Abraham Lincoln, he had actually experienced that himself, right? So this does offer some perspective because it's not just black people that were enslaved, and not even only in this country, right? The identity of certain peoples in this country is definitely tied to their history, right? White slavery was the historic base upon which Negro slavery was constructed. The important structures, labor ideologies, and social relations necessary for slavery already had been established within indentured servitude, white servitude. In many ways, came remarkably close to the ideal type of chattel slavery, which later became associated with the African experience. The practice developed and tolerated in the kidnapping of whites laid the foundation for the kidnapping of Negroes. I gave a shout out to Eric Williams in Trinidad, first Prime Minister of Trinidad. He also wrote an awesome book called Capitalism and Slavery. And this kidnapping, this also happened in the Barbary Wars as well. The white servant, a semi-slave, was more important in the 17th century than even the Negro slave in respect to both numbers and economic significance. So they're telling you exclusively that in terms of the percentages, their population was more affected by this system of slavery at one point or another. These are pictures that a lot of the abolitionists in the 1800s, like Frederick Douglass and others, were using to create sympathy amongst the people of the country to abolish abolitionists, right? To get rid of the institution of slavery itself. Abraham Lincoln. Now, I think that we've also shown how the rhythm of how societies function and where we were and how we've gotten. But even within the United States, now Abraham Lincoln, his life was a harsh one. And as a youth, from very young, about 7 years old to about 21 years old, he performed manual labor consistently at all types of jobs. They used to call him the rail splitter, right, when he was running for president. His dad would collect 10 to 31 cents a day for his service, and he didn't see a penny of that. All right. And he often mentioned it in his speeches and his interactions about, he would say things like he was like a slave and he understands that type of life. He had a harsh life. Now, this is a personal description of him, from him. It's autobiographical, but this is taken from the book Self-Made Man, The Political Life of Abraham Lincoln. If any personal description of me is thought desirable, it may be said I am in height 6 feet 4 inches nearly, lean in flesh, weighing on an average 180 pounds, dark complexion, with coarse black hair and gray eyes, no other marks or brands recollected. Now, some people theorize that last part of that comment, no other marks or brands recollected, is analogous to, and possibly even a play on words purposefully on his part, to the different ads where they would have enslaved persons for sale, and they would advertise them as not having any marks because to make them more attractive to potential buyers, right? And dark complexion means dark complexion. Sometimes people are so, we have been so entrained that we even mix words up because the cognitive dissonance doesn't allow us to accept it for what it is. But dark is dark. All right. These are a couple of cartoons depicting Abraham Lincoln while he was running and during his presidency. As you can see, the rumors of his ancestry were popular among a lot of people. All right. This is, if you just look at his the way he's dressed like a Moor, right? And some people would call him a Melungeon, which is taken from Moorish stock and other admixture of different peoples. Now, it's also said that his people came from to Illinois by way of Kentucky, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Germany, where the Palatine Boers that we were talking about had come from. Those black Germans. Right. All right, we're going to define the term brunette, because now you'll see in the next passage, hopefully something that is also a bit more revelatory. This is we have to define brunette. We went to etymology online to do so, because this will, again, give us a better contextual definition that pays respect to the time period in which the word was used. Right. Brunette, of a woman, dark in complexion, having a brownish tone to the skin and hair, from the French brunette, from Old French brunette, brownish, brown-haired, and dark complexioned. Not the typical way that people use brunette today, which means a Caucasian woman with dark hair, but back then it meant a typical black woman or woman of color. Abraham Lincoln. Life of Abraham Lincoln, being a biography of his life from birth to assassination. In that book, you'll find the following passages that describe his parents. Thomas Lincoln was about 5 feet 10 inches in height, weighed about 200 pounds, had dark eyes, dark skin, and black hair. He was always poor and indolent. Nancy Hanks, his mom, was a beautiful girl of pleasing manners and keen intellect. She was a brunette with dark hair, soft hazel eyes, and a high intellectual-looking forehead. Now, this is the part that we defined and wanted to focus on. So now if you have black parents, then I mean, hey. Okay. Now for this part of the discussion, we're going to get more into some of the more of a solution oriented stance and ways to mitigate some of the trauma that may be experienced by children, and how to prevent them from being affected by it before it even happens, right? This is a book called Awakening the Natural Genius of Black Children, and it's by Dr. Amos Wilson. He's an awesome psychologist. He was based in New York. I'll read a bio from the book about him really quickly. Professor Amos Wilson is a former social caseworker, supervising probation officer, psychological counselor, training administrator, and New York City Department of Juvenile Justice. He passed away in 1995. May he rest in peace. He was also affiliated with the First World Alliance, African Poetry Theater, African Echoes, educated at Morehouse College, went to the New School for Social Research, He got his PhD from Fordham University in the field of general theoretical psychology. Now, all those things are great, right? And his practice was with people of color, right? And now we're going to read a very important passage here for self-esteem and self-development. All right. Now, this is something that any parent can use. Now, here, in his focus is on children of color or African descent, indigenous peoples. Now, here he says, infant and early childhood education and intellectual preparation need not require that the parent be formally or highly educated, or that he or she provide the infant or child with highly structured, formalistic, didactic educational exercises and experiences. Didactic meaning moral instruction. You don't have to have a PhD in education to raise a child that will be an intellectual giant or just a great person. Right? You don't have to graduate from Harvard to raise a child that can go to Harvard, and he's going to get into how that actually can be done. Expensive toys, elaborate equipment, inordinate amounts of time utilized developing learning instruments and arranging the child's learning environment are not necessary. You don't have to have a super duper structured home in order to learn. All right. What they do need, right, are interpersonal games, parent attention, and creative, stimulating social interaction, right, where you model thinking and interaction, genuine love and sensitive care, a wholesome physical, social, and psychological home environment. These are the most potent stimulators of children's intellectual, personal, and social development. Now, what that sounds like to me is just care and empathy, right? Interaction, talking, allowing the child to help them to validate themselves. Right? Here he continues, social experience, that is the nature and quality of social interactions the child has with other people, the groups to which he or she belongs, are some of the most important determinants of his or her personal identity. The child looks at reflections of himself cast by a social mirror, right? We can infer from this information that the type and quality of social experience provided by a child's caretakers is of crucial importance in how the child, which will eventually become an adult, will perceive and evaluate him or herself. It's a lot more important how the child feels about themselves and how they perceive that you feel about them, right? This informs them of their value early on when they're just developing a personality, right? It must be kept in mind that while the definitions of self-concept and self-esteem emphasize uniqueness, this does not mean that one's self-concept does not contain important characteristics held in common with others, right? Significant negative self-perception and relatively low self-esteem have been found to be factors in emotional, mental illness, etc., blah, blah, blah. Sometimes we have to cut off the television and just cut off the imagery that children are getting from a system that is not necessarily geared towards augmenting their self-esteem at all times, right? They have to get that from us personally, right? Now here we have 3 coping strategies, and these can be used for at any time, right? First, and thank Mrs. Lloyd for these, first we can facilitate discussions on what is going on and how they can use their voice. How to start, sit somewhere comfortable. Ask, how do you feel about what's happening? How can you do something about it? How can we take action? Encourage children to keep a journal and share their feelings. Encourage them to research different figures and choose who to emulate, but they won't know who to emulate if they don't take that initial step. Now, this also helps them to validate themselves, right? And to eventually not need that external validation to know that they are worthy, right? Create intentional spaces for meditation, mindfulness, and fun. Identify a safe space within the home, right? A place where the only thing we do here is have peace, right? Wherever you choose that to be in your home, that has to be respected as a place of peace. And when this happens, when they are made used to this and they discipline themselves in that manner, they can be in a stressful situation outside of the home and they'll be able to go within, go inside, and go into that place because they've trained themselves for that. Be quiet together, listen to sounds of the ocean, or practice diaphragmatic breathing. And you can YouTube how to do this as well. We can involve children in the goal setting process. This creates hope, inspiration, and realization that we can change things. Planning, right? Go to your safe space, close your eyes for 2 minutes. What would you be doing if you felt you could achieve anything you wanted? Get some drawing paper and start brainstorming. Goals include social, spiritual, career, financial, academic, and physical. The whole being, the whole child, holistic, right? Identify SMART goals, things that are measurable, that are attainable, right? Goals for the family, 3 to 5, 10 to 15 years, right? And this is definitely necessary, right? Time flies, and we should also be planning generationally, right? We should be planning for children and our children's children, and they should be doing the same. Now, we know that as adults, when we do make long-term plans, we understand that, things happen from day to day. But when we have a goal in mind, that becomes a motivation and driving force to step around an obstacle in order to see that goal to fruition. All right. In conclusion, we have already discussed how we can assist in healing the collective psyche by bringing back that ancestral memory. Because when we know who we are and where we came from, we can understand why certain things happen and also where we're supposed to be heading in the future, right? We discussed certain techniques to create a supportive environment for our children. Again, that book is Awakening the Natural Genius of Black Children, Amos Wilson. Excellent book. My wife and I actually read this ourselves in preparation for our own daughter, Healing the Collective Psyche, and we presented 3 coping strategies. All right. And right now I'd like to say thank you. Again, my name is Sean Lloyd. Here's my contact information, the email, and this is our website, RobinsonLloydResiliencyGroup.com. Thank you.